Hey bro, what are you doing?
Oh, I'm just reading through the Percy Jackson series again.
Oh right, I forgot you were a fan of that. Did you hear about the new live action series?
There's a what?
Yeah man, there's a new live action series. You didn't hear about it?
Who's making it?
I think it's Disney?
Disney? The same Disney that just ruined Star Wars?
Hey man, give it a chance. It can't be worse than those first two
Yeah, I
movies.
guess you're right. It couldn't be worse than what 20th Century Fox was making. Alright then. Let's give it a try.
Actually, the show itself is not bad. And while I, as a huge fan of the Percy Jackson series, wish that certain things would have been done differently, I'm grateful to have a live action show of one of my favorite series trying its best to capture the mytho magic of Percy Jackson. First, let's talk about what Percy Jackson is. Percy Jackson and the Olympians began as a series of young adult fiction that followed Percy Jackson, a demigod, as he navigates the stories of Greek mythology in the modern world, in the hopes of stopping a great evil from rising and destroying Olympus. As you can imagine, adapting a story like this to the silver screen can be a challenge, as we've seen before. The question, as a longtime fan of the series and its sequel series, is will this adaptation live up to the ranks of Universal's Harry Potter, for example? And will it give fans of the series everything they hoped for as their childhood makes a jump to live action? Well, the answer is sort of. Let's talk about it. So, Percy Jackson and the Olympians, when it was first written, was written in a first-person perspective following Percy, obviously. And one of the benefits of this writing style is that it lets you get really close to the narrator as you are reading their thoughts, their actions, all of that stuff. So the characters' personalities really shine, and these characters and their relationships are the backbone of Percy Jackson's success, particularly the relationship between the main trio. So how did the producers of the show do with Percy, Annabeth, and Grover's character? I'd say 2 out of 3 landed right away, and I might be coming around on Grover after this latest episode, but let's go one by one. Let's start with Percy. I posted this on Twitter or X or whatever it's called now. Follow me there, by the way. The link is in the description below. But Walker Scobell is going to be a star. That boy is Percy Jackson. From his bewildered tone to his sarcasm and dialogue with his friends and his mother, he is everything you want from the kid playing Percy Jackson.
Does she think she's in charge?
Who do you think would be in charge?
I guess I assumed we'd do show of hands or something.
He's actually kind of reminds me of a young Ryan Reynolds, which I think is pretty fitting for Percy, so honestly, no notes for me. Next character we'll talk about is Annabeth, and I think that Leah Jeffries did a really great job in combining the cutting wit, the sassiness, and the know-it-all personality that Annabeth has while still capturing the kindness beneath it all. I know that she and Percy don't hit it off right away in the books, but I did find her coldness to Percy, given his situation, a little bit more palpable in the show rather than in the books. And while there were some weird writing decisions plot-wise that I didn't really love, it really has nothing to do with her character. Finally, we get to the character of the trio I'm not quite feeling yet, and that is Grover. While he gets much better in episode 3 as he's the mediator between Percy and Annabeth, who are 2 incredibly feisty characters, I'm still not over the betrayal of Percy in episode 1. I felt like it was something so out of character for him, and it kind of damaged the unwavering trust that he and Percy are supposed to have in each other. I think they can definitely overcome this with events to come in the season, but I just feel that even if it had taken a bit more time to reveal the truth behind Miss Dodds, I would have appreciated it more for Grover's sake, as he'd never betray Percy's trust in the books. And like I said, while it is a minor issue, it was one that kind of took me out of the show for a little bit, and I didn't quite appreciate it. Quickly want to run through my thoughts on some of the other characters of note that appeared in the first 3 episodes as well, starting with Luke. And the first thing I have to say about Luke is that I like him. I don't want to get into the details about his character arc, but I believe that Charlie Bushnell, I think is how you say it, Charlie Bushnell, will be able to carry that role moving forward. He's charismatic, he's likable, and so I'm excited to see more of him moving forward. I also like the way that the show builds the relationship between Percy and Luke, which is very nice to have early in the story, considering how important that relationship is. Chiron and Dionysius were also great. Chiron's calm and wise personality bled through strongly, and Dionysus so far I like even more than his book counterpart. Dionysus clearly is an example of the Disneyfication of awful people in the show, but his change doesn't bother me nearly as much as Gabe's, who we'll talk about later. In fact, the moment when he and Percy first meet still has me dying, where he's just like, "Oh, you're my son, and can you go get me a drink?" I loved it. I thought that was so funny. Gabe, on the other hand, I didn't really enjoy what Disney did with him. I think that they made him too likable, and I understand that Disney may have felt uncomfortable pushing the abusive nature of Gabe on display, but they could have still made him a little bit more cruel rather than a complete oaf. I did like that he didn't have any poker buddies in the story, though, as it always did bother me that a loser like him would have friends in the first place. So seeing him all alone playing online poker was pretty good, as well as him being a fan of the Jets, because, in a way, that's punishment in itself. Lastly, I wanted to take some time to talk about Sally. Now, outside of the original trio, Sally is my favorite character in the Percy Jackson universe, and for the most part, I think she was portrayed very well. Every single new scene she was given with Percy was used perfectly. My primary example of this is her speech about heroes and monsters, which is a major theme in the show. And I did notice in the show that she is a little bit more assertive than she is in the books, and this is probably in relationship to the toning down of Gabe's abusiveness. But the heart of Sally's character, being a mother that would do anything to protect her son, is still there, and I thought that Virginia Cole, did a great job with such a deep character, and I've been loving her time that she's had on screen so far. So given that the show is an adaptation of written work, the story for the most part is set in stone. Though as most of us know, even with a story in place, it's still possible to screw things up.
Harry! I protest! Harry, you put your name in a goblet of fire.
What makes the Percy Jackson situation so interesting is that Rick Riordan is actually directly involved with the production of the television show, even making a cameo in episode 1. He claimed that he had a desire to add more of the lore of his world earlier, and that's seen in many of the Easter eggs, as well as mentions of characters far earlier in the series than they appear in the books. An example of that is Thalia being talked about a lot in episode 3, where she is a character that appears much later.
Thalia turned back to fight to buy her friends some time. Her satyr protector tried to stop her, but she wouldn't listen.
There have been some minor tweaks, like Percy not seeing the Fates clip the string, or the previous fight that happens at Yancey Academy being boiled down to an accidental stumble. And most gratingly for me, the disarming scene with Luke, which is the whole reason why Luke states to want Percy on his team, being cut out, that have bothered me a bit. But overall, the story has been falling pretty much in line with the books. Interestingly, episode 3 and the characterization of Medusa is far different from how that whole interaction works out in the book. However, the portrayal of her as a person mistreated by the gods and the bind it puts Percy and Annabeth in, particularly Annabeth, with the confronting the less than pleasant realities of her mother, is actually pretty reminiscent of how Riordan depicts the gods in Percy Jackson and the Chalice of the Gods, and it actually serves to add more credence to the argument of one of the upcoming antagonists, and makes us really wonder, are the gods really worth defending? So while there were some tweaks that I didn't love, there were others that I thought were very well done. Overall, I found the pacing and storytelling and the dialogue all very true to the characters and well done. Adapting the entire novel into one season with fidelity is hard, but for the most part, I've been warming up to it as I've watched the episodes more and more times, specifically in a critical manner. Now, one thing I have no complaints about is the production value of the show. From the set design of Camp Half-Blood, to the choreography of the combat, to the effects surrounding the CGI of the monsters, everything is... I especially found the CGI for Medusa jaw-dropping, as it looked way better than it did in the movies, and the special effects team really came to work throughout this whole project, and I appreciate them, given how overworked they must be when I think about the slate of Disney Plus projects. One thing that the show has been doing masterfully has been the mist. We constantly get these cutaways between how the demigods see the world versus mortals, and it really shows how this world of myth manages to remain hidden from most mortals. The scene of the bus with the Fury Electo, or Miss Dodds, as we probably know her if you're not a big fan of the books, is the best example of this. I also really loved how they nailed that the monsters don't die, but rather turn to ash after being defeated. This effect reminds me a lot of the Thanos snap, and I know that Disney was behind the Marvel projects, so I'm wondering if they were able to like reuse the effect. But I'm not calling them lazy because I'm really satisfied with the way everything has been looking, at least in the effects department. Also, the effect on the winged shoe that Luke gives Percy deserves an chef's kiss. Like, absolutely incredible. It blew my mind. One of the major themes of these episodes have been don't judge a book by its cover, and the first theme was highlighted at the start of the series with a conversation between Sally and Percy at the museum.
Not everyone who looks like a hero is a hero. And not everyone who looks like a monster is a monster.
The idea of not taking anyone's allegiance at face value is something that will come back later in a couple major ways, and I love that it was Sally who taught Percy this lesson. It also aligns with the smaller sub-theme of Riordan's story, which is the impact of bullying on people, and to my surprise, so far in the series, it was Medusa who has best embodied these themes in the show. I enjoyed how the show expanded on the full story of Medusa from the myths and exemplified how flawed the gods are. It makes me wonder how Percy will react to future events moving forward. Self-acceptance is also a major theme in many young adult novels, as there's always this need for someone to accept who they are in order to face the threats before them. And I like that Percy remains the reluctant hero who is uninterested in who he is and in part afraid of the world that his father has made him a part of.
With that, everyone makes mistakes.
Why are you so afraid of who you are?
What?
This acceptance of self is also something I predict will relate to the main antagonist of this story moving forward, and I'm interested in seeing how that plays out as well. Overall, reviewing 3 episodes at once was not ideal, and hopefully in the future I'll be able to sit down and review each episode one by one to avoid making videos that could easily be an hour long. That said, my viewing experience was for the most part enjoyable, and while there were some changes that I didn't love, I can firmly say that in more ways than not, this show is living up to my expectations, and I'm excited for episode 4 next week. My rating for episode 1 would be a 3 out of 5. It was a perfectly acceptable start, but really nothing more than that. Episode 2, on the other hand, gets a bit better at 3.5 out of 5, but episode 3 has been the best so far at 4 out of 5. It was my favorite, and this upward progression is making me very hopeful for what episode 4 will bring. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. The link to my Twitter or X is down below, so please make sure to follow me there as well. And if you want to hear me talk more about Percy Jackson, I have a review for Chalice of the Gods on screen now. And if you want some more content about childhood classics, check out my Harry Potter video playlist too. Thank you all so much for watching. I wish everyone a happy new year. My goal for 2024 is to reach 500 subs, so if you could help me reach that goal, I'd really appreciate it. And with that, stay safe, and I'll see you all next year.